In brief, could you just kind of explain a bit of the Guadalupan devotion in Latino Catholicism and just kind of how that flavors Latino Catholicism?
Wow. First, a little lead up to that. We haven't said this yet. There's 22 countries in the world where Spanish is a primary language. The United States is the second largest Spanish-speaking country in the world. And every one of them has their own image of the Virgin Mary in Catholicism. So Guadalupe is the patroness of the Americas, of America, the entire hemisphere. She's certainly the most widely, venerated one in this country because two-thirds of Latinos in this country are of Mexican origin. But Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, Bolivia, Brazil, Cuba, they all have their own images of Mary, and I don't want to be leaving any of them out. Each of them would have their own feast day, their own national devotion. Some of them are also devotees of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Some Latinos have not really heard that much about Our Lady of Guadalupe. So, I want to honor all those other images of the Virgin Mary. In some parishes I've been, we've had processions, and each group would bring their own version of Mary, and we'd share them all together, and it was very beautiful, kind of a real international, global celebration that Mary is the mother of everybody. Secondly, I want to make a little comment about maybe some of your viewers are not Catholic, and sometimes people who aren't Catholic they want to know, well, what's all this stuff about Mary in the Catholic Church? A good friend of mine once was asked giving a talk to campus ministry, I think at Yale, but someplace he was giving a talk, and he was a priest, and they asked him afterwards, well, you know, do Catholics, who do they love more? Or he was asked this: is Mary necessary for salvation? Do Catholics believe Mary is necessary for salvation? And he said, no, that's not. If you read the Catechism of the Catholic Church, Jesus Christ is solely, his death on the cross and resurrection. That's the source of salvation. Mary is not necessary for salvation. And that's why we love her so much. And they said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I mean, you think about it. When you love someone, do you just give them what's necessary? If you fall in love with with someone that you fall in love with, do you then tell them, oh, I'm in love with you. I'm going to give you what's necessary. Here's a house and sufficient food to eat. And there, I've given you what's necessary. There, I love you. Well, no, of course, love is what you want to express above and beyond what's necessary. You want to give them a diamond ring, or you want to give a trip, or some other thing that is very precious to them. May not be expensive, but it still might be a precious sort of a thing. But it's precisely an expression of love because it's not necessary. And that's how we look at the Virgin Mary. God didn't, she is not necessary for salvation. God did not have to give us her. Christ was necessary. His mother was not. And yet, it seems like, at least this is the way we take it as Catholics, God didn't want to just do what was necessary for our salvation. God loved us so much, it just started overflowing. And he said, here, this is my son's mother. Take her too. She's also yours. She's going to walk with you. She's going to be your intercessor. She's going to be your model. Because, of course, in the scriptures, Mary is the model of discipleship. She's the first one to believe in Christ, to treasure the coming of Christ in her heart, and to be there at the cross and at Pentecost. She's there. So she was the model of discipleship. So, we've always had this great veneration of Mary, and in Mexico, it's to Our Lady of Guadalupe. And I don't know how I can possibly say, even in 14 hours, why there's such devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe. A friend of mine, Jeanette Rodriguez, who wrote a book on Guadalupe, she once was doing interviews at the Basilica of Guadalupe in Mexico City. And she was asking people, why is Guadalupe so important to Mexicans? And there was this old lady, indigenous looking lady, who was actually had a little cup and was clanging, asking for coins as people walked into the Basilica. So my friend decided to ask her, why is Guadalupe so important above all the images of Mary in Mexico? And the old lady said, se quedó, because she stayed. Because she stayed. She's always been with us in the good and the bad, in the suffering and the evil, in the hope. She's been constant to us. She's ever faithful. This came home to me. I guess I could try to communicate this through a story. Years ago, I went for the first time to the cathedral in San Antonio, where later I was married, San Fernando Cathedral. It's the oldest cathedral sanctuary in the United States of any religion. It's been a Spanish-speaking Catholic parish since before the Declaration of Independence. Beautiful place. You should give this to your listeners for homework. They need to go to San Antonio and go to that cathedral. It's a beautiful place to pray. Well, the first time I got to go to the serenata, the serenade to Our Lady of Guadalupe, the night before her feast day, feast is December 12th. This is December 11th. The singers come, secular singers, all kinds of, and they all sing a love song to Mary because Mary of Guadalupe is our mother. And in that celebration, they also do a reenactment of her apparitions. She appeared to this poor Indian named Juan Diego. He's now Saint Juan Diego. She tells him to go to the bishop and tell the bishop to build a hermitage, a chapel for her on the hill of Tepeyac. At first, the bishop doesn't believe, the Virgin Mary really appeared to this guy, Juan Diego, and there's several back and forth until finally she tells him, take him the roses at the top of the hill. And it's December. There shouldn't be any roses growing, but there are, kind of miraculously. And he takes them in his tilma, his Indian cloak, and he holds his hands and he goes to the bishop and says, I have the miraculous sign you requested. And as the story goes, when he drops the roses from his tilma, the image of Guadalupe appears on his cloak, on his tilma. And according to tradition, that's what's still hanging in the Basilica of Guadalupe in Mexico City today. So this is the founding story of the Mexican people. Everybody in Mexico knows the story. If you're Catholic, if you're Protestant, if you're atheist, you're all Guadalupanos. Everybody loves Guadalupe. So they reenact this in the Serenata. And I was sitting there. It's very beautiful. And it's just, young people and some others from the parish are acting this out and dramatically presenting it. And at the end of it, drops the roses. And the bishop has been sitting on his throne the whole time, receiving him as an inferior kind of a guest. And when he drops the roses for the first time in the entire presentation, the entire drama, Juan Diego stands up. He's an indigenous man. He stands up strong and tall because he has to spread his arms to look down and see the image that's appeared on his tilma. And now the bishop kneels before Our Lady of Guadalupe, and the priest, his assistants, they kneel before Our Lady of Guadalupe and say, oh, it's a miracle. But in kneeling before Our Lady of Guadalupe, they also kneel before Juan Diego, the indigenous man. And when that happened, that night when I was at that cathedral, the cathedral, of course, everybody knows the story already, but still, the cathedral burst into this prolonged applause. And I got the distinct sense immediately, they're not just applauding for the people who just acted this out. This is saying something. And I'm looking around me, and there's people in guayaberes and tuxedos and well-dressed, and everyday workers in blue jeans and flannel shirts. I mean, the whole mix of people is there. And they're all applauding, and some even weeping, And I've been thinking about that experience for the last 30 years. And that's what I write books about when I write about Guadalupe. Why do those people clap so much? Because in many ways, I say, this is my interpretation, what they saw was the story of America, the story of the forgotten people, the put down people, indigenous people, Aztecs in this case, but not just them, any person of any background, any race, any gender that's been put down, forgotten, and has been told they don't count and has not been believed. That story is the story about how those are the people to who the Virgin Mary and her son Jesus Christ, that image of Mary Guadalupe is pregnant. So Jesus is already within her. Those are the place where the gospel starts. God loves everybody. Jesus came for everybody, but he started in Galilee. He went out among the most rejected of the world in which he was born. Guadalupe starts out with Juan Diego, not in the center of power, on a hill outside of town where the indigenous used to worship, appearing to a poor neophyte who was just recently baptized. God breaks into history. Jesus breaks into history. Our Virgin Mother comes to us, beginning with the forgotten. And the Guadalupe story is the story of the final vindication of the forgotten. In the eyes of this world, there are certain peoples that don't count, or they don't count as much, or they're seen as nobodies. In God's world, what the world rejects, God chooses as God's very own. And that's the story of Guadalupe. It's the story of Guadalupe's appearance to Juan Diego, but Austin, the miracle of it is not whether or not Guadalupe appeared to Juan Diego and what really happened. The miracle is a miracle, but it's been repeated 1 million, millions and millions of more times over, because she comes to poor immigrants, to poor struggling people, to young people, to all kinds of people, to non-Mexican people. She's been coming to them for 500 years now saying, I don't care what you've been told. You matter to me. You matter to my son. And we're going to start something new here. And that's the story of Guadalupe. That keeps getting told over and over again. And it is a miracle because it's a miracle that confronts, challenges, and overturns the racism, the hatred, the stupidity of the world we live in. And that's why people love her so much, because she loves them.